Chair Best, I have 6:59, and we are live if you'd like to start.
It's now 6:59. I hereby call the October 13th meeting of the Frostburg Planning Commission to order. We'll begin our meeting with a roll call of members present.
Adam Ritchie.
Conrad Best.
Jeff Snyder.
Karen Crow.
We have a quorum. As we begin, I would ask that anyone presenting business before the commission or individuals who want to comment on business before the commission or other concerns, please come forward to the podium at the appropriate time. State your name and address for the record. Each meeting is recorded, so please speak loudly and clearly, unlike I'm doing apparently. Okay. First order of business is the review of the minutes from the previous meeting. Take a moment or two to look at them.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Next item is citizens' comments. Are either of you ladies here to comment on something other than the presentations we're having this evening? No. Thank you. All right. The first item then on our agenda is the Dunkin' Donuts site plan.
Chair Best, our presenter for that site plan has just arrived, but he has traveled some way. I expect him to come into the meeting room at any moment, but if it pleases the commission, could we reverse the order
Certainly
of
can.
the site plan and the application to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Certainly can. No
Thank you,
problem at all. The next item is a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals for an Airbnb on 134 Maple Street.
My name is Debbie Vance. I own the property of 134 Maple Street in Frostburg, Maryland. My home address is 13381 River Road, Greensboro, Maryland, 21639. I
ahead.
would thank you for having me here tonight. I would like to request permission to go in front of the zoning board for special appeals to have the approval of an Airbnb at my property. I feel that the Airbnb would cause no adverse effects to the community. In fact, I feel it's an improvement I operated the Airbnb for a year without realizing I was supposed to be not doing that. So in doing so, I have comparisons because I also rented to students, and I am currently renting to a family. So I have all three perspectives of what happens. With the students, I had more, I know we have to do that technically for the town to be able to support the university, but that was probably my most problems. The Airbnb was zero problems. The people are vested. First, they have to submit their government IDs, and that's all recorded by Airbnb before it ever comes to me. They have to be at least 25 years of age, so that should reduce the partying for the college students. Also, they have prior reviews that I can see when they've rented from someone else before, those owners would review them and say what kind of, if they had parties or if they followed house rules or if they were disruptive to the community at all. So I'm able to review all of those things before someone even is allowed to come and stay. Anyone who comes and stays, they are, I give recommendations for visiting the museums and the town and the shops and all of the tourism aspects that you would hope would happen there. But mostly I want to say that I feel that there's no disruption. I feel that the people who came were families, or so in my example for my year, that I had families that came and stayed that had relatives in the community, and they would come to visit for holidays. I had a lot of holiday visitors, and I think that that's perfect opportunity for them, because for them to stay in a motel is not really effective for them, because they would have 3 or 4 children and more than what a hotel room. They could cook while they were there. It was just as though a bed and breakfast would be, except I'm not there. But I am there to answer any questions they have. You can go onto Airbnb.com and look up Maple Retreat, because that's what I call it. You can see the house for yourself. You can see the reviews that I had from what the people who stayed did have to say about it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Sorry, I've not presented before.
That's quite all right. Anybody have any questions?
I do have, I'm sorry, there were a couple
Go
other
ahead.
things. I do have my own driveway, so I have four cars to park there. I also am in the town's rental,
Rental housing program.
thank you, the rental housing program. I've been in that since 2012. My own children went to Frostburg, so they stayed here also, so I had it during then also. I'm inspected on a regular basis. I always inspect very well, very minimum comments, and I fix anything they say right away. I've been told that I do extremely well with that. All my lead inspections, I've had lead inspections since I've been there consistently, and they all pass very well. I've never had a failing. The house is cleaned and everything that the rules and regulations under the rental housing program, I follow all the rules and have everything in place for the safety of whoever stays there.
Does this require a local resident agent?
That is what we're going to discuss later
Oh,
on as
later.
we discuss
Okay.
our text amendments regarding bed and breakfasts in
Okay.
our zoning ordinance.
I wasn't sure.
But staff would like to corroborate Mrs. Vance's statements that she is and has been in compliance with the rental housing program since she's owned the property.
Fine.
The situation is just that she finds herself in the R3 General Residential Zoning District, and an Airbnb or a B&B, excuse me, is permitted by special exception only.
Any questions of any other?
Oh, I was
Commissioners.
just wondering about the capacity of the unit, how many bedrooms?
Under the rental housing program, it has 4 bedrooms, but when I operated it as an Airbnb, I only had it as 3, and I put two living rooms instead. I thought it was nicer to have a TV room and a living room. But I don't want to take away the option to have my 4th bedroom if I ever go back to the way it was. There are 4 double or queen beds in the house. There's 2 in one bedroom, and then a queen and a double in the other. You could also, if you go on the Airbnb.com, you can see all of the rooms and how they're laid out.
Aside from the variance for the B&B, there's no other concerns or issues from the city?
We have none.
Okay.
Chair would entertain a motion for a favorable recommendation for 120,
134.
34 Maple Street to be converted to an Airbnb.
I'll make a recommendation I'll make a motion for approving an Airbnb for 134 Maple Street.
I'll second.
Thank
Okay,
you.
been moved and seconded. Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans.
Good luck.
Okay. All right. Next item will be the Dunkin' Donuts site plan.
Good evening. My name is Rick Curry. I'm with B&R Design Group. A while back, I was before you guys with a with a site at the PNC Bank, and we were looking at that one. I don't know if you remember it or not, but that one didn't provide corporate Dunkin' with what they needed in terms of some things, stacking distance, some other things. So we looked at a couple other sites, and this one at the Pizza Hut site is one that we think is going to finally work. So the site itself obviously is set up for a restaurant. It was granted a special exception for a drive-through window a while back there in,
It's been a while.
yeah, August of 2020, so over a year.
When COVID first hit.
So we definitely will be providing that with this. A lot of renovations need to happen to the building. The roof, it's not a typical Dunkin' facade roof. It's the old Pizza Hut roof. So the plan is to remove the roof and go with a newer roof. There's a portion of the building that's going to be removed in the back there. It's an old freezer. That's going to be removed. And then there's like a storage shed back there that will also be removed from the site. And that's the TBR on there is kind of what that means in the nomenclature there. So the new Dunkins, what they're trying to do when they have the room to do it is to provide two lanes. One is the obvious drive-through, and the other is a mobile ordering lane. There's not a high capacity for that right now, so there's not as much stacking requirement for that lane as there is for the drive-through itself. So with this site, it's big enough that they're able to accomplish everything they want to accomplish with parking, with stacking, and with minimal site work. There's very little site work. It's basically just around the building itself to create the drive-through lanes and to do some landscaping. And there's some extra pavement in I guess on the backside there that leads to a really wide lane, even though it's one way. But it's just so wide, there's really nothing else that you could do back there. So that's kind of the layout and the thinking with the site.
So is this arc fencing or just striping?
No. It's just striping. It's just striping.
It shows the one mobile lane merging with the drive-through.
That's
and
correct.
I wondered if that would slow things up.
No, that's typical. Even McDonald's. I don't know if you've been to a McDonald's that has two drive-throughs,
Okay.
two order lanes, if you will. Once they just take turns, and the thinking is that the mobile ordering isn't going to be that much. Yeah, it's not going to be as prevalent as the obvious
Look
conventional
into the future,
drive-through. Yeah. I mean, even if it's one or two cars, which is kind of what they're allowing for, maybe three, they're providing for it. And there's a decision point that needs to be made. You can see that. They'll clearly mark that on the pavement as to where you need to go to get your, I guess McDonald's and other places that don't have that, you just,
Chick-fil-A does it.
okay, Chick-fil-A does it. Other places that don't have that, you park somewhere, there's a designated parking space for it, and you call them and say, I'm here, and I guess they come out and bring your order at that point. So there'll be some pavement removal to do the landscaping and some sidewalk removal on the drive-through side of the window in order to create that lane to pull up closer to the building. The disturbance on the site is less than 5,000 square feet, which is good because the Soil Conservation District doesn't require any kind of sediment control plans for any disturbance under 5,000. So we're about 3,200, I think, and that's generous. I think I included everything we could possibly disturb out there in that number, and still we were well below the 5,000. So we're here tonight to get hopefully preliminary and final approval, since the site work is very minor. I prepared a lighting plan as well. We're going to add one more light on the, I'll call it the back side of the building, but it's the north side, yeah. So, and there will be building-mounted lights as well. And then the landscaping plan to screen up the dumpster area and to do some landscaping around the perimeter of the drive-through. There may be some mechanical equipment in that area that has to happen, and that will help to buffer that and screen that area.
What were you saying about mechanical?
There may be some in the loop, the inner loop of the drive-through. Sometimes there's some mechanical equipment that may go in that area, whether it's a gas meter or something just in there, and it's. But if you have any questions, obviously you're asking them. If you have any more, I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Are these standard plant materials that you use in Frederick?
Yeah, it would be. It's okay for this region. I know it's colder up here, but it's.
I was going to say the Korean spice bush might winter burn here.
Yeah.
It's up high and it's very windy up.
Yeah.
So you might consider an alternative.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
It is very windy up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Especially
that
that
input.
particular
I'll definitely
site.
look into that.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right, if not, the chair would entertain a motion for preliminary and final site approval for Dunkin' Donuts at the former Pizza Hut location.
I guess I can make a recommendation that we approve the preliminary and what you're saying.
And final.
Final site plan. I think it looks like it's ready to go.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve a final and preliminary and final site plan for the Dunkin' Donuts project. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Director Bennett, you had indicated to me earlier that we could drop a few items out of this and
We have a few discussion items that we can go over, and these are discussion items that do not have to have motions and votes this evening. If there's enough time, we'd like to brief you on them and perhaps get your guidance moving forward. The administrative business and communications received are for your convenience. They are the Maryland Department of Planning's Planning Practice monthly editions. They're online newsletters, but they're always full of very good information. So that's for you when you have the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
okay.
And then in terms of staff reports, I'd like to let Bethany update you on single-family dwelling permit issuance because we have some exciting news to share with you in that regard.
Yes, so far in 2021, we've issued 8 single-family building permits, and 5 of those have been since August 30th. I've got plans for 1 more that are out for review right now, and we also might have a multifamily coming before the commission, and so stay tuned for more details on that. I just want to note that this is the highest number of single-family dwelling permits that we've issued since the first phase of Pritchard Farms. So it's been quite some time since we've issued this many single-family building permits in 1 year.
Are these all in Pritchard Farms?
No, four of these are in Pritchard Farms, and the remaining are in Sand Spring Phase 2.
Oh, wow, great.
And then for your reference, I had just put the last few years' worth of comparable permits that we've issued. Just so you can get as excited as I've been.
And you'll probably recall when I detailed our calendar year 2020 single-family dwelling report that was sent to the Maryland Department of Planning. At that point, we had only issued 3 single-family dwelling permits. And I wanted to assure you that I didn't feel that that was indicative of the norm. I felt that was indicative of holding back due to the pandemic. And I think now we're seeing a nice growth spurt with 2 active subdivisions in development.
Good.
Yeah, very good.
We ready to go on now to the historic preservation
sir, if you
overlay?
are.
All right.
I'd just like to give a quick introduction to this topic, and then again let Bethany give you some more detail on it. We'd noticed a discrepancy in the terminology in the Historic Preservation Overlay District, and the intent of this text amendment is to make this section of the zoning ordinance consistent. The first discrepancy that we had an issue with was in the definition for alteration, where we say any exterior change that would affect the historic, archaeological, or architectural significance of a designated site or structure, any portion of which is visible or intended to be visible from a public way, including but not limited to construction, reconstruction, moving, or demolition. We felt that the use of the term way was confusing because later on in this section of the ordinance, we describe any alteration that's visible from a public street or sidewalk must come before the commission. And then we also state that any alteration that's visible from an alley does not have to come before the commission for approval. And both a street and an alley are a public way, so we wanted to straighten that up. So you'll see throughout the rest of this section of the zoning ordinance that street is the consistent term. Then we also wanted to add some definitions, and those include administrative approvals, alley, certificate of appropriateness, which is the formal letter an applicant receives once they've received an approval or a denial on their application, contributing resource, non-contributing resource, replacement in kind, which is a very important one. We wanted to define that very clearly because the way the ordinance is written, it states that any substantial replacement in kind does not require historic district approval. So we wanted to be very clear and define replacement in kind. So if there's hand-carved wood trim or molding that's being replaced, it's being replaced with hand-carved wood trim or molding, precisely. And of course, the definition for street. So that's the general intention behind this text amendment. Those are the general highlights, and then if Bethany has more to add, I'd like for her to fill you in on this because she has done, in large part, the legwork on this project.
The only other thing that I needed to add, we just went through the text, and throughout this section of the zoning ordinance, the certificate of appropriateness is referred to as certificate of approval. So I just went through and cleaned up that text. But that's the only other addition that I have for this portion.
So they'll no longer issue a certificate of approval?
No, but we will issue a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay. At first, I was kind of thinking that certificate of appropriateness was something that you were going to issue on the smaller things.
It's more of a vocabulary issue, and whenever the Historic District Commission approves a project, that certificate of appropriateness is what is issued. And a certificate of appropriateness is a relatively common term for this type of issue. So we just wanted to be consistent throughout, not confuse the terms.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments or questions?
If it is your general consensus that we move forward with this text amendment, our next step would be to take it to the mayor and council for their consideration. If they find that this is a worthy project and they give us the go-ahead to continue to move forward, it will come back to you for a motion and a vote.
Okay, so there's no vote tonight?
Right.
Okay,
We just want to let you know what we're thinking and what our intentions are.
all right, fine. So now we're looking for, to review the red line draft, or unless you want to read your memo too, I don't think you've all had a chance to
I
read that.
can briefly go over that memo for you. Since 2017, we've been experiencing a rise in the development of Airbnb style short-term rentals. They are very different from the traditional bed and breakfast business model. I'm sure you understand what some of those major differences are. There's no on-site innkeeper there 24/7. There are some other types of differences as well. But we developed a policy to handle Airbnbs because bed and breakfasts are not principally permitted in every zoning district. They are principally permitted in some, but require special exceptions in others, and are not permitted at all in our more strictly residential zoning districts. I think it's safe to say now that short-term vacation rentals are more than just a trend. They're here to stay. People are finding that that's a very comfortable way to stay when they're traveling away from their own home. So what we'd like to do, again, is clean up our ordinance so it covers this type of use, and that it's clearly defined, and that it also abides by the already in place rental housing regulations, because those regulations add a layer of safety onto rentals in our town in terms of inspections and registration and compliance with the Maryland Department of Environment's lead regulations. And so that's the basic brief. And then from there, I'd like to let Bethany give you more detail on that and what our thinking is in how to define the difference between a traditional bed and breakfast and a short-term vacation rental.
Yes. So, section 8.4 of the zoning ordinance has to do with bed and breakfast. So I wanted to split that out into basically two subtypes of bed and breakfast. So there's your traditional, where the innkeeper lives on site, meal service is included in kind of your package. And then I also wanted to create a second subsection that handles specifically short-term vacation rentals. So section A is just definitions of each one and tells the differentiation between those. Part B, you'll see that we've included some general provisions, including a table that demonstrates which zoning districts an Airbnb or a traditional bed and breakfast would be permitted by right. With a traditional bed and breakfast, a commercial use and occupancy permit would still be necessary. And for a short-term vacation rental, that would fall under a subcategory of the rental housing program. So basically, Airbnbs would still be registered rentals. They, as you will read a little further down, they may be subject to a more stringent inspections schedule. Currently, rental properties are required to be inspected every 3 years, and we would require that every year just because of the higher rate of turnover. So just moving down, and also I just wanted to note that neither traditional nor short-term vacation rentals would be permitted in R1, which is a low-density residential district, and then in C4, which is kind of up by Burger King. That's the only segment of C4 that we have in town, and then also the TLI Industrial Park neighborhood. which is not intended for residential use anyway. So, along with these general provisions that would apply to a traditional bed and breakfast and to a short-term vacation rental, we also wanted to add the caveat that property owners who are offering their property for rent either through a traditional bed and breakfast business model or through a short-term vacation rental business model are responsible for collecting and remitting the Allegheny County lodging tax. That's something that's already in place through the Allegheny County Finance Department, but we just want to make sure that our ordinance supports what is already in place at the county level. And then we also, LJ brought this to my attention just before the meeting, and we didn't get a chance to update the text here, but where it says no bed and breakfast shall contain more than 6 sleeping rooms, in our zoning ordinance definition of a hotel, we define a hotel as a lodging facility with more than 5 bedrooms. So I think that edit will need to be made before this is in final form, just for consistency's sake. And then,
If I may.
yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
I'm blowing through it.
Just one more note I wanted to make about the difference between 5 or 6 sleeping rooms. Our rental housing ordinance, also in line with our maximum occupancy limits as defined in the zoning ordinance itself, limit in the highest density zones an occupancy of 4 unrelated persons. We happen to have a handful of existing non-conforming uses in the rental housing neighborhoods that have 5 bedrooms. And provided that they have been consistently registered and inspected, they're permitted to continue in that manner. So at the very most, 5 bedrooms is the most we would ever see in a rental in any zoning district in town. So I felt that it was consistent that if we define hotels and motels as lodging units with 5 or more sleeping rooms, the maximum would be also 5 in a bed and breakfast. Thanks, Bethany.
Sure, thank you. So, moving on down, traditional bed and breakfasts, most of these regulations have stayed the same. A few of them have moved up to the general provisions section, but largely these are the same. And then in section D, these are all new regulations that would apply specifically to short-term vacation rentals. So point 1 is about how the license is required, and that's just in keeping with the standards of the rental housing program. And then we just want to make sure that short-term vacation rental properties have no outstanding taxes or liens. It's kind of just basic finance department housekeeping items. As I mentioned before, subject to a more stringent inspection schedule. No guest shall be permitted to stay in a short-term vacation rental for more than 30 consecutive nights. And we set that up that way because oftentimes we hear that folks who are staying for a month in a short-term vacation rental, Airbnb type of facility, they are, in town for a short-term contract for a job and living in a more residential setting rather than staying in a hotel room for a month is just more comfortable for those folks. So we wanted to accommodate them with that provision. And then similar to how we would operate with the Board of Zoning Appeals, we also would ask property owners who are intending to run a short-term vacation rental to notify their immediately neighboring properties, and that's what we would do with the Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing anyway. So that makes sure that the neighbors are well aware of what's happening in their neighborhood. There would still, in accordance with the rental housing program, an owner's agent would need to be assigned if the owner did not live within 25 miles of the property. And the last note, no outdoor advertising signs.
had a question there on the notification. That's a one-time thing, and that gets accomplished during the appeals process on the zoning board. Okay, I thought, when I first read that, I thought there was every time that a new group was coming in for 30 days that you,
No,
yeah, okay.
that would just be a one and done notification.
All right.
Mhm.
Two of the people who stayed with me, actually the very first ones, one work on with the windmills. When they come into town, they can be there for months at a time. My two particular ones, they came and stayed for 6 weeks, and I know you have that as 30 days. So what do we do when their work is? And then I had someone else who came and stayed did some work at the research center at the college, and they were also there for 6 weeks. What do you do when their work extends 6 weeks? Because both cases were 6 weeks.
We could certainly entertain a 6-week time limit as opposed to a 30-day.
Just because
That would be
that was my
45
experience. Was
days.
I had 2 6-week periods
Mm-hmm.
in my 10 renters. 2 of them were a
Mhm.
6-week period.
It's certainly something we can consider, and I'm inclined to bump that up to, say, 45 days at this time, because, again, this is a similar process as the
Right.
text amendment to the historic preservation overlay. We're here to discuss that this evening, and if it pleases the commission, we'll take that to the mayor and council for their recommendation, and then we would bring it back to you for a motion and a vote.
Thank you for your comment.
Should it exceed that period of time, should there be a clause saying that they would need to vacate the premises for a certain length of time and they could come back, or,
I'd be amenable to that also.
I mean, maybe check into a hotel, but what would that period be? You know, if things are going well. and-
Sure. I mean, would you think 24 hours would be reasonable?
If they are there and if they are not causing any problems and they're just living and working in your community, why would there be a restriction on time at all? That's just my question. If they're not doing, they're living in the community, they're going to work and coming home and living as anyone else who's living in a home does, why would any restriction of time be set?
I think that's a good question, and I think being a university community, we're used to the fact that we might have visiting professors who may come for a semester at a time. I think it's reasonable to be flexible.
So maybe we need
Part
to,
of it was the definition, wasn't it, that it's viewed as short-term and not yearly or...
Exactly.
Yeah, once, for example, the family who's there now, I would have never found them or they would have never found me if I didn't advertise in Airbnb, because she found me, she reached out and said, would you be acceptable to a long-term? And then I talked to her privately, and then we set up a contract for a long-term until they build their home, which should be a year. So that's how we went about moving forward when it's going to be more than just I'm here for a semester to work, or I'm here for a 6-week period or a 2-month period to do my project, my research project, or whatever it is. So when it does, I don't know, maybe there is a time limit that you say over this you need to have a private contract with them. But I find it silly to ask someone to leave their work in the place that they're living. The first person normally lived in Texas, so when they came here to work on the windmills, he really didn't have anywhere else to go. I guess I could have made him go to a hotel for a night, but that just seems silly just to come back the next day.
I agree with you, and I don't think we want to go to that. I mean, I personally don't think we ought to go to that extent. I wish JC was here, because the way I read this is a period of for a rental agreement for a period of less than 30 days. So we are looking at these as putting more restrictions on something because of the transient nature. That in essence has kicked in that these are going to be inspected once a year. Whereas if this was a long-term rental, this would be inspected once every 3 years. So to me, the reason why we're doing this is to capture that. If they were staying longer, day 31, they can stay day 31. I think that's fine. They don't need to leave. It's what's kicking in is those other things that we're looking at. We want notifications to the neighboring houses, and we want a higher frequency of inspection. So I think we're doing that. The owners in these situations in short-term rentals are agreeing to do those enhanced things. But if somebody wants to stay longer than 30 days, I have no qualms with letting them stay longer than 30 days.
I think it's two different things, though. I mean, if you're talking about a short-term rental, but then, you know, if somebody was coming here for a year or 6 months, you know, there would be they could sign a contract and get into a regular rental type thing.
I can't imagine anyone paying Airbnb prices to
Right.
stay
Right.
for 6 months. They're not going to do it.
That's why I was thinking, like, maybe 6 months is that amount of time that somebody could be there, because, you know, anything beyond that, you could sign a lease and stay, you know, pretty much anywhere, you know.
Yeah, and the other thing here is that we're putting the onus on these owners to see that the taxes are paid. Yet if somebody rents a house
Right.
Right.
from one of our rental properties for the same amount of time, there's no taxes.
I actually, they do pay taxes for Airbnb, and Airbnb says they collect them. So I actually did want to talk to someone to make sure that that has happened over the last year, and that they are doing that. Because
That Airbnb is doing
the
that?
Airbnb
on
is
your
supposed to
behalf?
be doing that on our behalf. That's part of the contract that we sign with Airbnb, that they will. And I can see what they charge the tenant that stays. They are charging them a tax.
Okay. It's our understanding that that does not happen all the time.
Okay, well, I would like to look at it and make sure that they did it with mine, so then we know, and I can go to them and say, you didn't pay this tax that you took from these people, and you're supposed to pay our town.
Yeah,
So,
our county. To be clear, our county collects that.
okay.
During your Airbnb, you personally don't have to collect the payments, the rent. It's through Airbnb.
Airbnb collects the payment, and they pay, and then they pay me after they take the taxes out, and their percentage, then they pay me.
We are not requiring these potential units, to be in cooperation with Airbnb. Someone could do one independently, couldn't they? And so,
They could, and
That's
there are many different models of the short-term vacation rental framework, like Verbo,
Yes.
HomeAway. There's a couple different ones. But the county does require that lodging tax be collected and remitted on a monthly basis. So it's not uncommon that in other places in our zoning ordinance, we require that all other state and local guidelines be followed. So this is a similar requirement.
The term short-term vacation rentals, is that something that was developed within a city of Frostburg, or is that a term that's out there in the industry, as it were?
It's a pretty common term nationwide.
Okay.
That's I had looked at a lot of different local ordinances pertaining to this, both in Maryland and elsewhere, and this is the most commonly used term.
Because it kind of leads you down a different path than what we're talking about here. People coming in for a short-term stay in an area, not necessarily for a vacation.
so should it be short-term / vacation rental?
I mean, if it's an established term, we almost want to go with the established term.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, so that people who are going on to some of these sites that provide the, what am I looking for? The advertising and the upfront work, so that people know where they can stay.
And I do have, and I can leave this with whomever, I printed out the Airbnb cleaning handbook, and this is what each person's supposed to do each time someone leaves, and it's there for your tenants to see, and they can file a complaint against you if you're not doing these things. So I feel like your upkeep and is much more stringent with this. I don't know who wants this, but
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think if we're gonna use that term, short-term vacation, you know, I think there's gonna have to be, you know, a number there. It's not 30 days, but I think that you're gonna have some sort of number, whether that's 180 days or whatever, you know. I just can't see somebody, you know, they're gonna stay somewhere for 6 months and pay the prices that Airbnb charges. I mean, you're gonna look to other places, you know, if
Sure.
you're beyond that, so.
And if we look at the timeframes that we typically see in the university-adjacent neighborhoods where we have a large number of rentals, we're looking at semester or
right.
annual rentals.
Right.
So a semester is at least 3 months.
Yeah, right. And you wanna, I mean, if it's 3 months, you wanna have a little bit of a buffer there too for, you know, that type of, you know, maybe 4 months is the, you know, I think it's definitely more than 30.
Okay.
There's a minor comment here I'm looking at page 103, when you get down to C, you deleted A and B, and then you started out with C. You need to change C needs to become A, and then on down through.
Yes.
So as a follow-up to this discussion, how about Bethany and I do some research on length of stay and see if we can come up with a reasonable average? And we'll discuss that with mayor and council as well, as long as that pleases the commission. And then when we come back for further review,
Okay.
we can hammer that out.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we definitely
Jeff, what was your
need to
question?
accommodate, you know, the college, you know, the
JC.
university. You know, we
Just
definitely need-
how she would interpret
Okay.
the 30 days.
Oh, okay.
Is it a minimum? I mean, because I'm sort of reading it as a,
Well, sure.
the 30 days triggers additional requirements on the owner to do additional things, because we're looking at it as a short term. So that
Yeah.
short term kicks in additional. It's not like a long term rental where you only do an inspection once every 3 years. This is you automatically, by accepting that, hey, we're going to do a short term, we're going to make it short term, we're agreeing right up front. We're going to inspect this annually, and we're going to notify our neighbors. Sure.
a suggestion that you could, maybe I shouldn't be making
No, no,
suggestions
no,
on
you're
restrictions for
definitely-
myself.
That's why we're
but-
here, yeah.
But,
I'm glad you stayed.
so when I did have someone there for 6 weeks, it made me more nervous that I wasn't there to make sure they were taking care of my home, taking care of the yard, not disturbing my neighbors. Maybe after 30 days or 60 days, we're required to come and do a cleaning in between.
Check in, kind
Or
of
an
thing.
inspection or something. to
That's
that.
not a bad idea.
Self-inspection.
We could.
My husband's gonna say, "Why did you get up there and say that?"
Well,
But
that makes more
it made
sense than
sense,
kicking
and it
somebody
would make
out.
me feel more. It's something that would have made me feel more comfortable had I probably done that. Even though it turned out well and it was fine, you know.
You know, I assume you have somebody cutting your grass and
I
things
do.
like that.
That's
so
someone-
that's not something that they would have to worry about doing, you know, as far as.
Yes, I have someone who cuts the grass, and when I had Airbnbers there, I also had someone plow the snow. And the only reason I even started the Airbnb idea was because when I go on vacation, that's how I stay. And when COVID came in, these students left, and so I had no one to help me pay my mortgage, and that was my plan: let students be in the house, pay the mortgage, and then we'll retire here. And then suddenly it was like, everything's got a lot harder to manage. And then I was actually terrified to let someone be there long-term like it used to be, because then I was hearing horror stories from people who have houses here, that people moved in and just stopped paying rent, and they've been in there for a year and they can't evict them, and that's even worse because now you're paying the utility, you know. So I did just let a family in there, and I did research on them. I looked up their, you know, like it was so much extra, because with Airbnb they provide you $1 million insurance if they are to do anything. So like there's this extra coverage with Airbnb that isn't there in your normal. And it turned out that every time someone stayed, the house was as pristine as it was when I left it. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because when I came up after the students, I would come up twice a year and I would scrub and clean, and it would take me 2 days to clean up after them. And when I come after an Airbnb person, 3-4 hours, and everything is beautiful and perfect again, and it's just a whole lot different, and it seems better. And the clientele, at least so far that I've had, have been really interested in the tourism aspects, except for the 2 that came for work. And actually, even those 2 wanted to know about things to do in the area. They had their children with them, took them to museums and things. So it did seem to me that it was an increase in tourism, and of a good kind. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
A lot.
Yeah, I think the idea of like doing a little bit of research, I mean, you know, the quick Google look, 31 days, and they dropped the V out of the STR.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just doing a real quick and dirty white paper look on gracious.com.
Okay.
Granicus, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Put my
I have
glasses
it on their
on. You've
website.
been there? Okay, so that was the first thing that popped up on the Google search.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, so I
Okay.
mean, they're you know, I sort of want to, I like the idea of keeping terms as what we can, because
Sure.
other people are going to come here and everyone's going to look, and the terms should be somewhat universal.
Mhm.
So we're all dealing with the same issues. Just not quite sure what we do with those long term. If it's more than 31 days, then maybe we should require a cleaning, require something that the owner do an inspection if somebody's going to be there. I mean, I don't
I
know
think
if we
that's
so
a
much
good
have to do
option.
it, but we could put it back on the owner. If they are there longer than 31 days, to have them document that and do a cleaning, do something,
Right.
so that they check on the property.
Mhm.
I think that protects the owner too.
Yes.
I agree.
So that would be the opportunity to encourage someone to leave.
Well, I don't want to say leave. It just it provides a safeguard for, as we said,
If they're not
for the
following
owner.
the rules.
Well, or if they're not following the rules, it would give the link. It would. Yes, it would. But it would give you an opportunity to have someone in the building during that time. And that's probably what we're looking for. I think that's a good idea.
I think we appreciate the flexibility that can accommodate someone who comes here for a work contract assignment that might be 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And not necessarily a vacation, but still find an Airbnb a preferable way to stay rather than a one-room hotel.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration, work that into what we present to mayor and council at work session tomorrow, and get it back out to everyone for their review.
Hey, just for a question. So the way I'm reading the chart, in the future, for short-term vacation rentals, the only thing that will have to come back before us would be for R2 and R4. Is that how I'm reading that?
Correct.
Because everything else is by permit
Yes, the short
or
term.
per license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to.
I'm not sure, you use the term permitted by right. I think what you really mean there is permitted by existing code.
Principally permitted.
When you say right, that gives me the impression that I can do it because it's my right, as opposed to it's permissible by code.
Okay.
That might be
And the
a
way
better
we term that in the zoning ordinance is principally permitted uses.
Yeah.
We can keep that consistent that way
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
That'll work.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration this evening.
Any other business?
I have none, sir.
Okay. Any other comments from the floor? Okay. Then we are adjourned.
Thank you for your insight.
Yes.
Once I stop being nervous.
Yeah, we
We're just
really
happy to
appreciate
see
you coming
people.
before the board this evening. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you stayed for the discussion because I think your insight is very valuable and it's given us a lot to think about, so we appreciate it.
I think it was a good accident